Welcome back to the show. Today we've got the legendary Dr. Baktari. He's got a podcast that is, it's one of those ones that is well rounded. It really looks forward. Today they're working on a series that's really about CEOs, crash course on how to be a CEO, how to really create culture. He grows medical facilities all across this country. He's got a skill for bringing large teams together in a powerful way. His gift is really resonated on building companies and seeing through the process. Remember that whole thing about expanding and organizing. He's a master of that. And today we're going to get into that. If you really are looking to grow a company, you want to take a second maybe and listen to what Dr. Batari's got. It's exciting to have him on the show. Dr. Batari, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Big honor.
As we look at the big bold statement, nobody is born, no one's born a leader, right? There's no, good morning. Oh, look at this little baby. Oh, so cute. Oh, he looks like a leader, right? There's nobody born a leader, right? That's nonsense, right?
Right.
We may have some skill sets, but ultimately to be a leader, to be someone who develops large ideas, it takes, let's talk about what it takes to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point because you may have some qualities that would make you be a good leader if you got the proper training, but it's not a substitute for acquiring the skills because being a leader requires you to navigate situations which are not natural, are not soft skills. A lot of people think that if they have a good personality, if people like them, that they would naturally become a good leader. Now, you need those things. You need to be someone who's respected, well liked, and someone who is relatively modest and doesn't have any of those bad traits. But they're not a substitute for getting trained as a leader. And I think most people eventually figure that out, but they may figure it out by making a lot of mistakes and paying tuition that way. Because sometimes people go through multiple failures or companies that go down before they go up until they start to slowly acquire those skills. But you wouldn't learn how to fly a plane that way, right? You wouldn't crash it 20 times.
No, no. But I
Before
always
you.
tell you say there's a cost to it. I call it the stupid tax, right? There's a little bit of a stupid tax everybody pays in learning how to become, a great leader. There's a little bit of a tax you have to pay, and it's called the school of hard knocks.
But that doesn't apply to landing a plane. That doesn't apply to, even learning the piano. You wouldn't get in front of 10,000 people and start playing the piano unless you knew what you were doing. So the question really is, why is it being a leader viewed like you need hard knocks? You don't need hard knocks to become a race car driver. You take you take courses. You have a coach. You don't become an MMA fighter by just going in the ring 100 times and then learning how to become a fighter. So I don't know why leadership needs the school of hard knocks and not just formal training, either through a mentor, apprenticeship, or some other way to get the skills you're going to need to navigate everything, to navigate hiring, firing, motivating, building culture, mentoring, negotiating, when to put the foot on the gas, when to pull off the gas, how to calibrate conversations, how to handle yourselves when you're being attacked, how do you handle yourself when you're being peddled. It's not all things that will naturally come to you unless, like you say, you go through the school of hard knocks or you actually get trained.
Well, I think there's a little bit of both, right? I mean, Mike Tyson says it best. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? And
Mhm.
there's a little bit of that. There's some skill, right? I mean, you're absolutely right. I've been learning to fly a plane, and I've got hundreds of hours in practice. A lot of it with an instructor sitting right by me, holding that wheel with me as I start to learn those little nuances
Right.
of how to make those final little adjustments. I would not have gotten that plane and try to fly by myself without them. And I think that's one of the great gifts of having, someone like yourself who's really adapt and help guiding. For me, a lot of mine was school of hard knocks, right? I didn't have those. Maybe some corporate people I had before I became an entrepreneur, and they taught me some skill sets on how to be with people in a way. But more or less, a lot of it happened by trial and error, right? I mean, the first employees I hired were literally they were scarecrow. They were my friends, right? I mean, the first people we hired for the first company I had, They were friends, and I would tie them to a stick, and I would shake the stick when customers would come by. But they were, I didn't know how to lead yet. I didn't even know, so I hired people that kind of matched my skill set. And then as I developed and future companies, today I'm looking for best in class. Today I'm looking for the best in it. But that's something that I had someone like you train me, right? Someone I didn't even know to even look there yet until I had gone through a few iterations of the first version of me.
Right. And I think I'm guilty of that. You're guilty of that, but that doesn't mean someone else has to do it that way. I think a lot of people think I should be the CEO or the leader of a company because it was my idea, or I'm the one that put the money in. That may be fine. That it was your idea, or you put the money in, or however you want to get to it. But you still have to go and get trained. Otherwise, you will pay that tuition that you're talking about. So why jeopardize the launch of your company by not going and getting those skills, finding a mentor, really understanding how to do that stuff, and not just learn by trial and error, because it may cost you your first company or second company or third company, and doesn't have to be that way.
Well, and that's a tough one, right? So how do we start to look at that? I'm an entrepreneur, right? Let's talk to that. The entrepreneur that's listening to us today, right? They're
Yeah.
here. I've got an idea. I've been working in corporate America. I'm tired of it. I want to control my destiny. I want to be an entrepreneur.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now I'm ready. I've saved some money. I've got a little bit of investment. I got enough to live
Right.
on. Whatever I've created for a little safety net for myself. I'm ready to go do this. Where do I start to look? How do I start to go and approach this idea of getting training to become an entrepreneur, to become a leader?
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to turn that question on its head a different way. Most people don't think you need training, so that's the first part. I mean,
That's right.
if you think it's intuitive that hiring, firing, building culture, motivating, negotiating is all intuitive, you won't seek it out. So I think the first hurdle is to say, oh no, I'm going to need these skill sets, because you're not going to search it out if you think, listen, everybody likes me. I get along with people, people respect me. Of course, I'd be a great leader. So you're not going to go search it out like you're suggesting if you don't acknowledge that it is a skill set you need to acquire, literally go out and get. I mean, I could have put you in that plane that you fly 1,000 times without an instructor, and the first 1,000 times you would have crashed it. uh, the but if you go into that cockpit and say, there's a bunch of buttons here, I'm sure I could figure it out, then you're never going to seek out. So anyway, without belaboring that, you have to acknowledge it's not a soft skill. Being likable, although very important, and you need it to be a great leader, is not going to help you land the plane. Then after that, then it comes really, whether it's uh, getting mentors, watching our podcasts or similar podcasts, reading books, and literally, doing an apprenticeship. I always tell people, if you want to learn how to run a company, go out and find someone in the industry that you're thinking about going into, and say, hey, can I shadow you for 2 weeks? What's it going to take for me to just hang out with you for a couple of weeks? But it's got to be the right person, of course. You could be mentored by the wrong person too. So it's kind of a catch-22. You want to find the Michael Jordan of your industry, and whether it's, and going to conferences in your industry, seeking out the Michael Jordans of your industry, and say, hey, Michael, what's it going to take for me to hang out with you, or take your course, or hang out with you? So is it but that needs to be clarified. Getting mentored means getting mentored by the right people, and that requires going to conferences and going to symposiums and finding out who really has already blazed the trail. So when you identify a mentor, you've got the right person or persons.
Well, so I meet with leaders all the time, and my judgment is that most leaders aren't. They're too arrogant or too cocky, or I'm not even sure if their ego, if it's, you call it ego, their egos are just they're too big, and they're like, nope, I got this. I don't need help. For me, I was similar to that, in that I thought I knew what I didn't know what I didn't know, right? I got into this whole thing, and as an entrepreneur, and I just thought I could just grind, and for the most part, I was dumb enough to be successful, right? Because I didn't
Mhm.
know what I didn't know, and I didn't know I couldn't do it, right? And I just worked my ass off, and I did it. Now later on, as I start to develop, I start to notice that I've got a pretty good game, right? But if I want to get into the
Mhm.
pros, right? If I want to go from the small companies where I was like, $1 or $2 million worth of revenue, which was great, to the companies I have today that are 80 or $100 million worth of revenue, right? I want to go to that. And then I needed to bring it in, and it kind of worked a little bit different for me, where at first, I just kind of was stubborn about it, right? I literally just got in there and was stubborn about what I was doing, what I was trying to create, and those early days, you know, I just feel like maybe you know that young and dumb wasn't so bad, right? That kind of
Mhm.
it got me through. And then
Mhm.
as I wised up a little bit, and noticed, hiring a coach, had I known then what I know now, I
Mhm.
would have had a coach a lot earlier. Right? Having a coach come in, having someone that was outside of myself, a business coach. And for me, I went through, to me, business coaches are a lot like musicians. Not all
Mhm.
music rings the same in everybody's ears. Some like
Mhm.
country, some like rock and roll, some like jazz. And, each business coach is a little bit different. Finding one that works for you, that's got that rings in your ear, someone that you trust. I think that's an important relationship to build.
No, but you had, I mean, but in many ways, I think you're describing the perfect example. A lot of people think that instead of getting the skills, they're going to work hard. And listen, working hard is so critical to any business, but you never know the opportunities you miss by working hard but not having the skill sets. That contract you could have gotten, that connection you could have made, or people who uh, didn't stick around or work with a company because the leader was grinding it, but they weren't really there to mentor them and build the culture that they needed. So, is hard work important? Of course. Is hard work necessary to make any company get to the next level? Of course. Working, long hours, weekends, nights, always being on is a key ingredient. But if you don't have some of the other stuff, yes, you can grind it, but you'll never know what you missed out, or how,
Mm.
you could have been to the $100 million company out of the gate potentially, or not, but potentially, if you had the hard work, the grind, as well as the skill sets, right? Even the skill sets to negotiate. I bet you negotiated on a completely different level than you did back then, and you never know, what you missed out on, or the people that you didn't hire that would have stuck around, but you didn't have the ability to enroll them into your vision, build culture. Most people, they don't want to just work for someone; they want to work for someone they admire, that can enroll them into their vision of what the future is going to look like for them. And coming out of the gate, I'm not saying you did or did, but a lot of people just hire and don't really invest time in uh, developing people, enrolling them into their vision, micro mentoring them. And so you don't know what you didn't get, is what I would say. And so even when successful, I would argue you could be even more successful if you had acquired the skill sets early on, had that business coach out of the gate, like you said, found mentors, went to more conferences, identified more leaders in the industry, and learned the mistakes they made, so you could just bypass those mistakes and go right to the top.
I feel like I was listening to a story the other day, and they were talking a little bit about how a bird has to peck its way out of a shell, right? And
Mm,
in the pecking of its way out of a shell, it generates the muscles that are necessary for it to fly. Like almost as if the struggle to get out of that shell is what creates its ability to be a bird, right? To be to and have if you come by and you were the one to open up the shell, there might not be,
Mm.
it might not be ever successful enough to fly, right? It never generates the muscle it needs. And a lot of that happened for me, right? A lot of that early days. One, when you talk about vision, I didn't even, I was literally every conversation in starting a company, I was developing the business, right? Every time we would talk about the business, what it was, what we wanted to do, what our purpose was. Like I had some ideas, right? I don't, I mean, how many times when you were starting a company, did you have it all worked out from the get go, right? A lot of it got developed in each and every conversation
Good.
about what we were doing, right? There was a little bit about every time I would call a potential customer, literally in selling them, I was creating it. There were times I didn't even know what to sell, and there was a couple times I sold some stuff I didn't even know. Look, I call it throwing my keys to the fence. My first big program. At the time we were selling construction management services, and back then there was no such thing. There was no such thing as outsourced construction management services for retail
Mm.
customers. It wasn't invented back then. Uh, you know. And I would call people, and in the conversation of what we wanted to do, we were creating. And people were like, "What do you want?" I've got a general contractor. I'm like, "No, I don't want to be your general contractor. I want to be your owner's rep." So, no, we have employees that do that for us. No, we want to do your overflow work, right? Because every team has an ebb and tide, and we just want to do your, when you guys are really in a high production, we want to help out there, so you don't have to hire more people. During your peak times, you could just offset it
Mhm.
to us, and we'll take care of it for you. And literally, as we were developing that conversation, right, the business was
Mhm.
getting created. I mean, when
Right.
as you were creating each of your clinics and all the clinics you have around the country, and all the work that you're doing, as you were developing those clinics, how much of that did you have figured out at day one? Did you know the strategy you wanted to go at,
Mm.
or was that something that you guys developed as you were flying? Were you flying the plane and building it at the same time?
Excellent, excellent. I don't know any business that doesn't do that. What you're describing is really the natural evolution of most companies. There, and I talk about this some of my podcasts. When that's why when you take on a partner at the beginning, and you say, okay, you and I are going to be partners. You do this, I do that. Well, and you define those rules early on, but then the company evolves, and then you got to go back to your partner and say, whoa, 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 wait. We actually, what you were going to do, we don't even need anymore. And so it becomes an issue, because if you don't, the likelihood that your company will stay what you thought it was going to be when you were drawing up the plans is almost zero. There may be a few outliers here and there, but what you're describing is really the evolution of a company, because as your customers give you feedback, as the market gives you feedback, you can't just stick to your guns and say, no, that's not how we drew it up. We're still moving forward with that. You may draw something up and some plan, and you're going to go to market, and a lot of people are going to give you feedback. The internet's going to give you feedback. Social media is going to give you feedback. Your clients, customers, vendors, what you thought your vendors
Yeah,
could provide you, all of a
yeah.
sudden, oh, I thought we could just write a little app for that. No, no, that's a $20 million project. Oh, okay, I guess we can't do that. So what you think you're going to execute, but that's part of the skill sets. Are you good at getting feedback? A lot of people
Yeah.
don't like to hear something uh, that is against their original plan, and what they'll do is they'll double down and say, no, I'm going to accelerate my commitment to that bad idea, even though I'm getting tons of data every day that's telling me that that wasn't a good idea, that direction we wanted to go. We, instead of going to this set of customers, we should be going to that. Versus other people like, no, no, we definitely are going to go to small construction companies in your case, or small builders, or we're going to go to the medium. And then the market gives you feedbacks that you can't possibly know when you're drawing up your plans. And the question is, can you adapt? And how tied in is your ego to the fact that you already had these set of plans?
It's tough, right? It's a tough one. When do you know it's sunk cost? Let go, right? Because the ego, I've been there, right? I've held on to businesses too long, right? I've gone too far, right? I got invested in something that was an idea that I loved, and I went after it, And there was plenty of feedback saying, "Hey, this isn't going to be successful," but your ego gets sucked into it, and it's hard to hear that feedback because there's this very fine line between, pushing really hard and don't quit, 5 seconds before the
Mhm.
miracle
Right.
happens, right?
Right.
There's a very small little, there's and it's
Yeah.
it's you know, I can remember times when I've been in business where, you ever go fishing and you catch a
Mhm.
really big fish and it
Mhm.
pulls your line out and zzz, I've been down to where all my lines been out and I've been down to the knot, right? The knot that held the string to my reel. And
Right.
I've been in business where I mean, literally down to like I can't make another paycheck. And then something
Mhm.
happens in a miracle that will pull off, will pull something back. And all of a sudden that'll unwind and went from a literally the knot to a $6 million a year. And that's the ups and
Mhm.
downs of being an entrepreneur, right? There's these days when you have these amazing years, but you got to be willing to risk, let that line out to go. Now, once you start getting a little bit more invested, a little bit more cash, right? That's one of the benefits of having more line, right? You can let out a little bit more line as you get more financially secure to have bigger ideas and be a little bit bolder. But when you're first getting started, I mean, it feels like the knot gets hit all the time when because you're broke, you're rubbing two sticks together to create a fire. You're really in those early days of being an entrepreneur, and that's the joy, especially if you're young, right? I love it when Gary Vee says, "Shut up, you're young, be broke, live on the couch, go." I mean, seriously, if you want to, now's the time to go
Mm.
risk it all. Now, as you and I get a little older and we got families, and I don't know how risk averse I start to become, but when you're young and you're trying to be an entrepreneur, go for it, right? That's the time to let it all out. Even if you fall down to nothing, what's the worst case scenario? Is you're living on someone's couch.
Mhm. Right. No, makes a lot of sense. And the time to take risks, like you're suggesting, is when you're younger and you get the experience behind you, the hard knocks, like you were talking about earlier. Uh, I love it. That makes a lot of sense, and I definitely espouse the same thing. Especially young people who are working for a salary, but they're itching to start something. I always tell people now's the time to jump
Go for
ship
it.
and
Yeah,
go
go,
for
go
it.
go now. If you're listening right now and you're itching to do something, stop listening right now and listen. If you're young and you're listening right now and you're like, I want to start an idea, do it now. Quit bullshitting
Right.
yourself. It's never get better. Like if you're young and you're doing and you have no idea, great. Here, both of us, both guys you're looking at, we're young and did have no idea what we're doing. And every entrepreneur starts that way, right? You start off
Right.
and you don't know what you're doing. You stand out there, you're a fraud, right? You feel like a fraud, but you're acting it, you're faking it till you make it, right? There's nobody who wakes up just like Dr. Baktari was talking about. Nobody wakes up. I wasn't born to know what I'm doing. I literally showed up in my first completely an actor, right? And acting as if I had this figured out. I mean, one of the first big accounts we got was we were going to remodel these things for Red Lobster. They gave us I don't know 160 remodels. At the time, I was in my basement of my house. We had an old dining room table that three of us sat at. We had a secretary in the middle, a project manager on one end, and myself on the other end, and three of us sat there. And I remember I had the speakerphone, and I had it on speaker when I was talking to the customer, and we were just at that closing, and he goes, "All right, good. We're gonna get started with these 60 projects." He had no idea that we were sitting in my basement. None, right? We were completely faking it to get there. And I remember, like, I almost fell out of my chair. I remember we got this again, like my back of my head almost blew off. It was like, wow, we got this. Now I call that throwing your keys over the fence. Now we had to go figure out how we're going to manage these, right? But that we
Right.
were being bold. We were stepping out there. I think it takes a little bit of that. So as we start to look at minimizing that learning curve, right? Bringing in and getting smarter where maybe I don't have to get myself all bloodied up. Today there's plenty of opportunity for me to
Yeah.
learn how to be a better leader.
I mean, for example, I listen to multiple podcasts, read multiple books. I go to conferences, even at this stage, because I'm always amazed We go to every industry we're in. We sign up for every national conference, and the biggest breakthroughs I've had is literally sitting at the bar, that evening after a conference and talking to some people in the industry, and they just, give you these ideas and these skill sets and these
Wait,
failures that
Dr. Baktari. Wait, hold on. So you mean you didn't find your greatest learning lesson watching TikTok?
they
Oh, yeah, I mean, seriously. So scrolling didn't get you anywhere? Right, when I tell young
not
people
just
like you want to get something done, stop effing scrolling. Get off of that crap. Right? Go to a conference, go to a lecture, listen to podcasts, listen to Dr. Baktari's crash course on how to be a CEO. Right? Seriously, here instead of scrolling, watching
right.
cats fight, chase a laser pointer. Right? Stop the bullshit, and it's time to get your ass in there and find. You want to be a leader. You want to be an entrepreneur. You say you want to be rich. You want to do something. Great. The only way you're gonna do that is find an idea and listen to the people like Dr. Baktari who've got podcasts that will teach you how to be a great leader. Right? It's time to stop. Here. Oh look, they're racing the Tesla truck again. Oh, look at that. Great. Oh, look,
Yeah.
Elon Musk wants to talk about going to aliens. Great. That's not going to get you there. Right? The key
No.
is finding the way. Go listen to the people who've done this before
Right.
and
Yeah.
learn something more.
I remember early on when I was trying to think of my first business, I had read a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which is a classic business book. And in that book, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it. It talks about, if you have to start a business, why not start a business where there is no competition? Meaning, come up with an idea where you don't have competition. It's going to make it a lot easier. Now, that's easier said than done. But if you're going to be the 10th construction company in a city that has a 9, and you think you're going to kill it because you're going to provide better customer service or answer your phone faster, that may work, but you're basically going into a field where you're going to have to steal customers from the other 9 construction companies, to use your analogy, which is fine. And a lot of people do that. If you're going to be the 10th barber in a neighborhood, if you're going to be the 10th coffee shop, if you're going to be the 10th accounting firm, versus what Blue Ocean Strategies talks about is come up with an idea where your competition is irrelevant, right? If you can come up with something where your competition is irrelevant, and then go there and kill it and provide great service and great product, your life's going to be a lot easier. That one little idea that I learned from stealing it and reading it from other people, among other things, helped shape my approach. So it's not just being in your basement, coming up with an idea and just going for it. Sit down, analyze, and say, what can I do before I start this idea to maximize my chance for success, right? Yes, hard work will also maximize it, but what else can I do? So coming out of the gate, there's no guarantees. Everything can fail. But what are the things I can do? I talk about this. Your first 3 hires will probably determine whether your company fails or succeeds. Okay. Your first 3, you hire 3 bozos, you're dead. You hire 3 people who are gonna, be lockstep with you and fight it to the end. On any given idea, all things being equal, your first 3 hires will, you know, quadruple your chances for success. So how do you hire those first 3 people? How do you go about it? Do you just look for the best skill sets, the best personalities, the best what? What do you need to look for? I know we talk about that on my podcast, but there's a lot of other podcasts that talk about that, other authorities that say, hey, how do you find people? How do you find people in this stage of their lives that they don't just need another job, right? How do you know those people? And those are the people you want to find. You don't want to find someone who you're just a stepping stone on their curriculum or CV among 5 jobs they're going to have in the next 10 years. You want to find someone who's going to say, hey, you know what? I'm in it to win it. I want to change my life. I want to have better things in my life. And part of that is having this amazing career where I grow something. You find someone like that in your first 3 hires, I'm not saying your business will succeed, but it will dramatically improve the chances.
Well, a lot of that has to do with finances. I mean, like when I first started, I was broke, right? So all of a sudden I'm hiring. I mean, I remember my first construction manager that worked for me. He was a bar manager, right? He
Yeah.
was a really nice guy, but he worked at a bar, and
Yeah.
I brought this guy on, but because of that, he was a nice guy. I'm not gonna lie, he was a really really great guy. It turns out it gets really good in construction later on, but because he was inexperienced, and when I started the company, I was trying to solve a problem. Right. For me, I had worked for corporate America, and in construction, I'd worked for these brands that I was in the really fast growing brands. Right. I started with Blockbuster Video and Discovery Zone and Boston Market and Einstein Bagels, and these were brands that were growing really really fast. But the problem is that you work yourself out of a job, and I was tired of finding a new job every 4 or 5 years, right? Because they never fired me. They
Hmm.
would say, hey, we're not building anymore. We don't need the whole department. And all of a sudden, everybody was like going, and I was like, all right. And the whole, well, I believe, I'm like, look, I can do the same thing for people. I can just do it on an outsourcing basis. But no one had ever done that before. You talk about that blue water thing. And I started going, well, all right, how could I go out and find those companies that, are growing fast, that I can offer them construction management services where I could manage their vendors and their architects and their permits, and help them manage that process just like I did when I was in house for people, because I love the business. I loved being there. But how can I do that? And how am I going to charge? And I, just figuring that whole thing out took a few minutes to do. And those first couple of years, yeah, they were tough, right? And you went after some clients, some people I knew, and stuff. I had some luck, a little bit of luck in there. But I always told people the harder I worked, the luckier I got, right? The harder I
Of
worked, the
course.
luckier I got, right? And it seemed like somewhere in there was a gift in, just. But those first people, I couldn't hire good people. One, I didn't know how to, right? By the way, I wasn't much of a leader in those first years, right? I didn't have the skill set to hire people smarter than me. My ego couldn't do it, right? I was kind of, I had, this inferiority complex. I hadn't developed yet as a leader, right? Because my judgment is, as I've developed as a human being, and I mean
Hmm.
that's a lot of my own work, right? I mean, how many CEOs do you
Hmm.
know that need to do personal development as
Yeah.
much as their business development? As I work on the person, and today
Hmm.
as an owner of multiple companies, I feel like my number one job is to work on the people that work here. If I work on them, I hire good people, and they work on the companies. They do a good job of growing the companies. My job is to grow the leaders that work for us.
You hit the nail on the head. That is your number one job, is to mentor and grow and enroll people into your vision so they can run with it, because you only have 24 hours in a day. So if you can multiply people that have your vision and drive, it- that and they can multiply people, meaning not only do you need to mentor people and build leaders, but you need to give them the skill sets to mentor and build other people, so it exponentially grows into your organization and builds culture that way, because you can't meet with every employee, you can't mentor every employee, you can't be there to give every staff or leader the skill sets. But if you train and invest in your super, high tier leadership and give them those skill sets, then it will have an exponential impact on your organization.
That's awesome. Dr. Baktari, I mean, you have a magistry for growing companies. As you look at the top things to really develop as a leader, where do you start? Let's give the audience a kind of some steps to, um, you know, help grow. Where one, how do I find myself a mentor or coach, right? How do I start? Where do I start?
Finding a coach really is, first of all, pick your industry. You can't just randomly pick a coach. You can't, your uncle or who just has a good business, they may generally coach you, but I actually have had a different experience. When I have gone to conferences and what have you, I'm always surprised, because I think people think approaching people who are already the Michael Jordans of their industry, they may get blowback. But it's actually quite different. It's once you're in the club of that industry, there is a sense of I want to help members of the club. And yes, you can't just go off the street, but once you work your way in, you're on a committee and you're one of them. There is a sense often that I have seen from people who are at the top of those organizations. Yeah, if you just bump into them in the hallway at the hotel, I'm not sure you're going to get anywhere. But if you're in their courses, if you're in their club, if you are part of the organization, I'm always surprised by how much giving, unconditional giving, occurs at these things once you're in. So, what I would say is find your industry, get in, volunteer, get involved, what have you. You'll naturally, and you go to these conferences and you're like in a lecture 8 hours and you learn a lot. But then everyone goes to the bar that night and that's everyone's had a drink or two. Then the truth comes out about how to really get ahead and what do you get, who you
Yeah,
got to know.
yeah.
Yeah, this is the guy you need to talk to. Yeah, forget the. Are you having trouble getting through that company? No, 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 no. Frank is your guy. Let me give you his cell. And those are the breakthroughs. When you're at the conference and they feel that you're one of them, and then all of a sudden they give you the cell number that you really needed to get your company to the next level and things like that.
All right, so that sounds like a good spot to start. Talk to me. So, what was you talked about that Blue Water book? Was that your first book that inspired you?
That wasn't my first book. That was, but I'm talking about in terms of picking a business. I've read other books on leadership, mentoring, what have you. Tribal Leadership is another great book people should read. But that was in terms of selecting a company. I knew early on that I didn't want to be in an industry where the goal was to steal clients from someone else. I mean, which is, if you think about it, that's 90% of businesses. Like, let's get into this thing and let's take clients away. But you got to think of like Uber and other people who just create their own space instead of being the 10th accounting firm. Create something that all accounting firms can use. Like you were saying, like a software that all construction companies can use, and make yourself relevant, because it's possible to succeed, but if you want to blow it out of the water, come up with something. Basically, you don't really have competition, and your biggest hurdle is not going to be your competition. It's convincing people that your product even exists, right? That's the challenge. When you're in the position where people don't even know that your product exists, then you're in a sweet spot, because it's a lot easier to let people know about a whole new class of service or product than try to say, hey, we're 5% better than this other company. Our software is 5% better than QuickBooks, or our 10% better, or we have 3 more features. That's doable, and a lot of people do that. But for me, my thing was, I'm not going to go out there and create a product that's 3%, 10% better than somebody else's. I just want to have a product that, uh, you know, you may buy it or you may not buy it, but you're not getting that product. That's my proposition. You may not like what we're selling, but if you don't buy it, you're not going to get it anywhere else. So when you're in that position, then you work on customer service and all the other stuff that most people talk about. Obviously putting them first, making their lives easier, but come up with a product that really, if they don't buy it, they're not going somewhere else.
All right, so number one, get around industry experts, right? Get active in committees and groups and get into the industry. Number two, when you're in the industry, find some mentors that are in the industry to guide you. People want to help you, right? Go into the premise that people want to help you, right?
Yes.
Three, right? Number three, right? We get into where do we go from there?
Well, I would just say, try to find an industry that you're not just going to have to be 5% better than the rest of the guys. Come up with something, because that's going to maximize your chance for success.
There you go. So something
Because
your product offering is dramatically different than the competition out there. 1 or 2% difference isn't going to differentiate you. You're up against too much other competition. It's not worth the juice ain't worth the squeeze and what you're trying to do out there. And now it's a price point, and
and,
anytime you
and,
work
and
on price point.
Right. It doesn't really build, like you use the word, it doesn't really build a moat, because if you're just 5% better than the next guy, what's going to stop a new company to become 5% better than you?
That's right.
What you need to have is, what you need is to have a moat around your business. Then your hard work and all the stuff you described then blows it out of the water, right? So you're going to need all that stuff that you were talking about, but do it in an industry where you don't have to wake up the next morning and somebody else is doing it. And then last is just go ahead and get those skill sets. Learn how to negotiate. Like my one of my favorite phrases is, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. Right? How do
Mm,
you negotiate? How do you do win-win in every conversation? If you're not talking win-win, you set it up where when you do a deal with someone, it's not your last deal with them, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I got in that room and I got everything we wanted. Okay, maybe you did, but that's the last deal you're going to do with them.
that's right.
Who are they going to call? Who are they going to call when they need the next deal? Not you. So I think these are skill sets that you need to acquire, where you learn how to negotiate, how to enroll people in your vision, how to hire, how to fire, when to fire, when to hire. Do you hire just for skills, or do you hire for desire? Do you a combination of both? And how do you go to people and say, look, what you're doing is great, but it's not enough. Can you give me more? Because if you give me more, we're going to take you places. It's how do you calibrate conversation between different staff? One of the things I found really interesting is you may want to say the same thing to 10 people in your organization, but you can't say it the same way. You have to calibrate how people want to hear it. The same message, but calibrate it and said differently to 10 different people. That's a skill you need to acquire.
No, that's it. Listen, and that's what I want, audience members. I want you guys to go check out Dr. Batari's. Listen, he's got a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, lots of wisdom. If you're out there, you're an entrepreneur, like most of you guys are, right? Go listen to Dr. Batari's podcast. Doc, how do we get to your podcast? And let's make sure everybody can go check in and check it out.
Yeah, our podcast is Baktari MD. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, all the platforms. Plus, we have a website called BaktariMD.com where we have all our content, course material, and other stuff. That's BaktariMD.com. Also, if you want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn and all the other social media platforms. So, Baktari MD on LinkedIn. And if we can help anybody in any way, we're more than happy to try.
Well, we'll put all those links down below. You guys can find them down there. And as always, audience members, you know how much I love hearing from each one of you. I mean, last week you guys had so many great comments. Please take a second and do that now. Like and subscribe. As always, we're grateful. The whole team, Van and Connor and Joe, all the guys in the background that put this podcast together for us. Really, it really warms us up to know that you're listening, and like and subscribe if you can. And please go check out Dr. Batari's podcast. You will enjoy it as I have. Dr. Baktari, thank you very much for your time. I'm grateful.
Thank you so much. It was a big honor. Thanks so much for having me.